I am Dr. Pranati Reddy. Thank you, Jayashree, for having me in this panel discussion. I am an obstetrician and gynecologist. I'm based in Birthright by Rainbow at Hyderabad. I've been with this organization now for almost 20 years.
So, Aruna ma'am, if you could introduce yourself.
Everybody, good afternoon. I'm Aruna Dayal. I'm Director of Arpanas Rural Community Development Services. We work in Karnal district in Haryana and Chamba district in Himachal Pradesh.
Okay, ma'am. Anisha, if you could introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Dr. Jayashree. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Very happy to be here. My name is Anisha Philip. I am a commercial leader in the healthcare space with about 17 years of experience across positions in sales, marketing, and business leadership. I am very passionate about building and developing diverse teams and also about grooming people and talent. So looking forward to an exciting discussion today. Thank you.
Kriti, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kriti Baveja. I'm the co-founder of Mom's Joy. Mom's Joy is a national award-winning maternity and nursing passion brand with a mission to empower mothers and make them feel beautiful, confident, and happy about themselves. We take pride in being a completely Make in India brand, and we made more than 50,000 expecting and new mothers happy, including celebrities like Soha Ali Khan and Sania Mirza.
And Pallavi, please introduce yourself as we start the discussion.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Jaya. I'm Pallavi. I am the founder of Super Bottoms. We are a brand of reusable and skin-friendly cloth diapers. I am a mother, entrepreneur, and a marketing enthusiast in that order. And Super Bottoms is a brand completely run by a team of mothers, and we actively involve new mothers into the team.
So I think we are going to have a very and stimulating conversation today. So we will start with certain questions or thoughts that came into my mind as we thought about this project. So I will start with Dr. Pranati Reddy. Ma'am, what do you think is the impact of on the health of women and how different it is when they are striving for a leadership position? We all know the stress is right? So how do you think women's health is affected because of this rise? You are practicing in a very urban area.
Because of the rise of, sorry, I didn't get that, Jayashree.
Because there is a strive and an ambition to be in leadership positions, right? Which involves a lot of stress. So how do you think it is impacting the health of a woman and what changes are you seeing?
So essentially, see, one of the things I tell people is that health is very much a personal responsibility. And I think it's something that people should learn to invest in. You know, it's just like any other project that they're taking up. Personal health, I think, is so important. And I think the last year has proven to us, the pandemic, that truly health is wealth. You know, the people who've gone through the pandemic very well are people who have been fit and healthy, and they've been able to, you know, kind of maintain a very healthy lifestyle. So even when it comes to women, they have to be extra careful about this, because oftentimes, because of these multiple pulls, so many directions that they, you know, profession, and women are primary caregivers at home, and that's never going to maybe you know, director of your own company, you may be an entrepreneur, but by the end of the day, you also continue to be somebody's mother, somebody's wife, somebody's daughter-in-law, somebody's mother-in-law, and those roles I don't think are going to. And I have no complaints about that actually, because I think women themselves are, you know, nurturing by nature, and I don't think they'll be very happy to be stripped of these roles. I don't think they'll be very happy to be stripped of these roles. They just need to balance it out well, and I think very, very important for people to realize that good health doesn't fall into your laps. It's something that you have to work. And I'm sure, you know, as entrepreneurs, you realize that we put so much effort. When we have a project, we look at deadlines, we look at, you know, what we're going to invest into it, what are the returns. I I think that women should start looking at health as a project. It requires, you know, a dedication, a commitment, investment of your time and resources to remain healthy. And unless we do that, it's not going to happen. So there are trade-offs when you do that. And I don't think you should prioritize anything more than your own personal health, because if you are healthy, you'll be able to commit yourself to your work more successfully, you'll have more long-term success, and you'll be able to look after your family also better. So it's about striking the right balance and understanding that health is really a very important priority.
I you, ma'am. I think once health is there, everything just comes by, isn't it? So, ma'am, how much do you think medical profession is gender biased? Do you think there's still a gender bias in medical profession also?
So, Jayashree, this is the thing. Both of us, I think, may not be the most appropriate people to comment on it, because so we practice in a profession which is dominated by obstetrics and gynecology, and this is what you're going, we are going to talk about also a little bit. So, obstetrics and gynecology is entirely like majority, particularly in India, is populated by doctors who are female doctors. We see exclusively female patients. We have female colleagues. So I think the we don't I don't think we have faced gender bias, because we've grown in this. We are surrounded by colleagues who are women. We are looking after patients who are women. But like anything else, I think when you're working for an organization and you're trying, gender bias, I think is a given. It's going to take a longer time, probably more of struggle, and I think things. I think we just have to work harder as women to prove that we are capable of doing a lot of things. But, I think it's taken for granted that men can do many more things than. So, like any profession, I do think we have to work a little harder to reach that point of leadership. And you do silly there, I think. And sometimes I think women, we are particularly sensitive to the fact that that might be happening just because we are women and may not even be the truth of the matter. But it exists, and I think it's just about taking it on board and make dispel those myths. And I've realized that once you perform, there's um, there's a lot of respect for performance. It's just, I think the initial few steps, the more difficult things, you probably have to work harder, like to prove yourself. But once you get there and once you earn the respect, it's kind of move. That's my
So true. I think I will add here that women doctors at the age of 30 struggle harder because when they have families, when they have to run, so their career takes a lot more meandering than a man's career. Even in a medical field, I see so many of my residents having to take it much slower than what a man would do. So I think this sort of a bias still exists in the system because the system doesn't have inbuilt processes for pregnant women, lactating mothers, small children. I think a lot of corporates are working on it, but still it is a challenge even for doctors too. So I would like to ask Karuna ma'am. I think she's the wisest, the senior most amongst us. She can give a lot of inputs, doing fantastic job with rural women. Ma'am, how do you think healthcare system for women has changed, especially in the rural population? Is there any change? Are women becoming more aware and coming to doctors?
I think there's been a sea change in the healthcare system for women and children. Arpana worked in setting up a community healthcare system focused on mothers and children in the 80s. Believe me, there was no health infrastructure, and health practices in rural communities were primitive completely. Mothers were not giving breast milk for 7 days after delivery. All deliveries were conducted by untrained midwives who considered, and it was considered an unclean, dirty task. They would be making cow dung cakes and going straight to deliver the baby, the infant. Mothers were often lying with livestock. I mean, these were the conditions just 2 decades ago. Breastfeeding used to happen after 7 days after the delivery. No weaning foods. I mean, no immunization. This was in '84 when we began focusing on mother-child health in our area, and similarly in Himachal. And we had to train health workers from homes where, I mean, women had no mobility. if we asked them to map, say hand pumps in the village, they did not know where the neighboring mohalla ka hand pump was. I mean, that is the mobility which women had at that time, just from the house to the field and back. And we had to train health workers to visit house to house. And in the face, and today, you have a health system that is focused completely. There were no hospital deliveries, there was no health visitors, there was no subsidies for women's nutrition or anything. Now, with the National Rural Health Mission, it's totally focused on mothers and children. You have ASHA workers going house to house. You have, subsidies, and you have incentives, and you have stipends for nutrition. The government is trying to ensure hospital deliveries. So the whole system is geared towards the well-being and wellness of mothers and children, which was not the case 2 decades earlier. It's been a huge journey which the nation has taken, I think.
So, ma'am, do you think there are still more roadblocks and challenges, or you think they are being removed quite efficiently? What is your take on that?
Well, in between 1984 and 1990, the first 5-6 years when we stepped out in the field, and there was a total contempt for women's abilities and competence. There was mockery. There was a lot of resistance from patriarchal elders, from men, from mothers-in-law. I mean, there was resistance at every level. But with persistence, Arpana was providing clinics in villages. We ensured that the health visitor visited every home regularly. So these women became leaders, and they became counselors, they became friends, they became sisters to mothers. And over a period of time, all health practices were totally transformed. And I think now, the same way, government is training ashas because women need hand holding and help in the early times of their pregnancy and as young mothers, especially. And a lot of those roadblocks are, I think, removed. The resistance from families to introducing new health practices, that's no longer there. Mobility of women is completely, on a different scale, where they didn't step out of their homes. They're visiting new mahallas, new neighborhoods, new towns. So I mean, generally, there's an acceptance of new health practices also when they're introduced, by the healthcare system. So a lot of those have changed and been removed.
So, ma'am, I think you guys, Arpana is also helping ladies to turn into entrepreneurs and starting their businesses. So, what do you think is the uptake of it, and how much they are participating, and how are the men taking it in these communities?
Similarly, as we stepped out from the healthcare service, we because as the NRHM came into, if it, into its own, we felt that we should not replicate government services. And the next need that really hit us in the face was the complete marginalization of women, even in 2000. They had no control of resources, even their earnings were not more than 30 rupees a day, which was given to the husband. There was no recognition of their contribution in the household or as paid labor. And when we started using the self-help group platform, men folk and mothers-in-law would literally pull away women from the meeting by the hair, literally. And they used to tane maar ke, ye kya karegi, she's a stupid, she's stupid, she's like she's nothing. And that kind of contempt was really terrible to see. And today, the self-help groups provided them with the means to build up savings and then to have credit access, so that if there was a crisis in the family, they had the means to meet that crisis. And then gradually, if they wanted to invest in income generation activities, again, they had access to credit. As they started using the money for domestic needs and for small business, the whole scenario changed. The whole perspective of men and mothers-in-law towards their bahus became transformed. There was a new respect, a recognition. Women found a new dignity. They found a new voice in their families. We have two marvelous entrepreneurs sitting here, and your rural sisters, I think, face the kind of contempt and denigration and demeaning, sort of conditions which I think you're lucky enough not to have met. But then they transcended those by sheer grit and perseverance. And we are working with about 12,000 women in Karnal district, out of which over 60% took loans and invested in small business. And they, in their own words, their lives are really transformed. They are पहले कुछ घर में decision होता था, even if it's which doctor to go to or which school to send my child, उनका तो सुनी नहीं जाती थी, रिश्ता करना उनकी सुनी नहीं जाती थी. Now they are they are the primary counselors, because a healthy respect has been won by the women because of their own achievements. If their husband wants to make a down payment on a three-wheeler, bank nahi dega, nobody is going to give it. His wife goes to her meeting and the next day hands him a check for the down payment. You know, I mean, so being entrepreneurs, having credit access, having control over financial resources has transformed their lives, their status in their families, their status in the communities. It's a changed world for
I
them.
think in a nutshell, what we understand, ma'am, is economic independence has a major role in increasing the gender equality in the system. I think urban also it applies, not so much because of education, but in rural definitely, I think your NGO has done a fantastic job to bring this. Now let us move to Anisha. I have a question for you. How do you think a corporate structure should encourage women leadership, Anisha? Because my husband is an out and out partner in a firm. When I look at the partnership roles, I see 200 men partners and 3 women partners, and you see so many women training to be chartered accountants. And I always look at him and say, what do you guys do? In our profession, at least we have so many women coming on the top. So where is the corporate system should be helping people, or how should it encourage women leadership? You are a leader yourself, so you can give a better perspective on that.
Sure, thanks, Dr. Jayashree. I will give that a shot. So I think firstly, of course, it's about walking the talk, because it is really proven, and data, talks about this, that having a more diverse workforce in terms of gender diversity really helps to have a more productive and impactful business. So I think there's no doubt about the fact that women definitely should have a seat at the table. And really that starts with maybe, people in leadership positions, women in leadership positions, empowering more people to get there, right? And if we look at India, we do see that a lot of women fall off in the mid-management level because of personal family commitments, etc. So I think as far as corporates go, where they can really play a role in creating an enabling and a supporting environment is to facilitate them through that stage of their lives. So it could be maternity leave, and of course, a lot of companies have now extended it from 3 months to 6 months, which has made a huge difference in women coming back to work post having a baby. The other is also in terms of providing some flexible working hours. So even maybe when you're coming back from mat leave, how are you able to still juggle both work and home? And a lot of corporates also now are coming up with daycare facilities for children. So that really allows the parents to be assured that their children are in good hands, and they can also focus on their work. So I think there are some companies doing this already, especially on the MNCs and some of the big Indian corporates. But yeah, absolutely, if we can have more companies taking this up and really realizing how important it is to have that workforce, we can definitely make a big impact.
How much help it would be women at top will take decisions to help other women? Because I do understand the corporate man-hour working is very important, and it's all work I mean, it's all result oriented and target oriented, all professions, right? So do you think women being at the top is going to make a significant impact for the woman trying to climb up the ladder? You know? So what's your take on that? Is it making a change for them?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is, because one is they act as role models, right? The minute you see some women in leadership positions, then you also know that, okay, this is possible. I mean, even myself, when I started out, obviously I started right at the bottom. And then if I saw women in leadership positions, it became something that I could aspire to, right? If I only saw men at the top, then probably it would be more of like, now I really need to prove myself to get there. And it's more about, you know, challenging the status quo. So I think, yes, you know, women at the top is aspirational. It acts as a role model for people. I think as women leaders, we also have an important role to play in coaching and mentoring upcoming, you know, female talent. So I think that's a big role, because obviously we understand maybe some of the phases that you will go through, some of the challenges you face. And of course, it's not about treating them differently. I think it's very much about equal treatment, but just being cognizant of, you know, different phases and different balls that they may have to juggle than men, right? So I do believe, yes, having women leaders helps to cultivate and encourage more women leaders from various levels of the organization. And personally, that has also been my experience, that, you know, if I've had role models to look up to, it's also encouraged me to really push ahead.
Right. So what do you think are the main challenges a woman faces when she climbs up the ladder in corporate? You know, one I feel in corporate is so when patients come to us, the long working hours of a corporate setup. I think that's a big deterrent when they want to grow, when they start families. What else do you think are the challenges a woman faces in the corporate ladder?
So I think it really comes down to making choices. And I think at different stages in your career, when you have maybe also some commitments on the home front, you need to be able to balance you know, the two, right? So maybe you need to step back from one a little bit, step forward a little bit for the other. So it is about making choices. But at the same time, I also think it's about challenging the status quo. So there is nothing that a woman cannot do. As long as she's equally qualified and capable to do that role. So I really think it's about challenging the status quo. And, you know, if let's say a manager feels that, you know, you cannot do this for whatever reasons, but you can always go back and explain why you will make it work. So articulating also, you know, your aspirations, how you want to be seen in the corporate space does go a long way in helping facilitate that.
So let us now shoot a question to our entrepreneurs. I think Kriti, Anisha, do you think you have any question for me? Because I've been hounding with you with questions. So would you want to ask us doctors anything?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So probably to yourself and Dr. Pranati, you know, I come from a corporate kind of healthcare setup, but obviously you are on the other end of things, the medical side. So do you see any differences in the challenges that women leaders face in the medical industry vis-a-vis the corporate healthcare space?
So basically,
I think, yeah, Dr. Pranati, go on.
no, go ahead, Jayashree. I'll listen.
No, so what I feel, I'm sure Dr. Prasi, we doctors though our working hours are long, I think we can be slightly more flexible in our approach. We don't have an office time. You can choose your time of working according to your household needs or the times you want. Obviously, it's a big challenge because you feel you're not doing as fast or you're not available to patients. It's very different, but I think at the end of the day, it's where you want to be in your life that makes a difference. But I think when we grow as doctors, it usually is by 40 you're recognized as a good doctor, right? So by that time, I think most of the doctors have done that part of family and other things, and then they really settled on well, and you have to come from a very supportive family to be there. So I don't think there's much of a difference. But yes, sometimes I feel the long meetings, the compulsory long of a world where there are meetings. For us doctors, I'm sure Dr. Pranati will agree. Once we are done with patients, you go back to family, right? So I think our growth is not dependent that much on these meetings and talks. And, what would Dr. Pranati like to say about this?
Yeah, Fundamentally, I agree. And I think also, the same challenges, like for personal reasons, why the growth gets interrupted in the corporate sector, be it pregnancy, marriage, child rearing, any of these things. This is what, kind of puts some breaks probably in a woman's progress. And I think it's important for organizations, like you said, especially where, we have women leaders, to understand that and to create a work environment which is satisfying for the younger girls who are growing in the medical sector. So that's one thing actually that we have done in a very, aggressive and consistent manner. So we realized that, girls want to grow, they want to be involved in their profession, but at a certain stage when they have young children, they also need to be able to devote time to their families. By the end of the day, you want to have a holistic life, isn't it? I don't think anyone wants to do one thing at the expense of the other. They want to be able to grow in their profession, they want to be able to nurture their families, and this is what most women aspire to do. And so we've encouraged a lot of young women now here to work as teams. This is something that people should, they should provide a working environment which would be conducive for growth at all stages of their life. So, when you have younger doctors working, we encourage them to work as pairs or as teams, so that, even the patient doesn't suffer. They have a seamless healthcare, which is provided not by a single doctor. This expectation, particularly in obstetrics and gynecology, has been very high previously, that, one doctor has to take care of them through pregnancy, attend for their labor and delivery. And we've kind of changed that, and it's been accepted very well by patients also. So we have a huge workforce right now of young dynamic doctors who work with us, and they're very happy because they're able to work together as teams. They feel more safe and more secure, and they're able to spend time with their family also. So like Anisha said, I think as women leaders who've gone through these challenges, it's important to address that and set a working environment which will allow women to flourish and grow in their careers at all stages of their personal life. Because I don't think, that we'll ever reach a point where it is one or the other. They'll have to do both. And again, like Dr. Jayashree said, by the time these girls, reach their 40s and they've settled their children, they become extremely productive as workforce, because, they are so happy to have been provided with an environment like this, that they continue to work and they work harder. And I think the catch up happens pretty fast. So you see more rounded, holistic lifestyles actually provide for more efficient working. And the other thing
So
I wanted to comment, madam's thing is, sometimes, very often, a roadblock to a woman's progress can also be another woman. She was talking about the mothers-in-law, and how they were in terms of the way they looked after their daughter. And that's something I think as leaders we have to be mindful of, because with whatever experiences were negative for us, I think we should work towards addressing it and making it more positive for the next generation which is coming up.
True, true. I fully agree with you. I think that the idea of creating an environment wherein they are buffered when they are doing other work is very important, in whether it's medical profession or a corporate job. So let me ask my entrepreneur, Preeti, do you think sense of fashion, I mean, you're not you're dealing with fashion also, affects the growth or perception of a common leader? Is something I would ask you, because there's a lot of perception when you see somebody, right? So what do you think? Does it affect the perception of a common leader when you consider somebody a leader? I mean, we have different variety of people sitting right in front of us, but what would you think about this, and what do you see about this?
Right. So I personally actually think that one of the barriers to women leadership are institutional mindsets, which are basically including different types of gender bias and stereotyping, and dressing in a particular manner is actually one of them. While, in an ideal world, you'll think that clothing should not determine one's growth or one's perception. Sadly, in the real world, it does to an extent, and maybe more so to women. And there are several studies that also show that women are typically taught, not to look too tough because they'll be perceived as being aggressive, or too casual, otherwise they'll not be taken seriously. And this is where I think like a change is needed, and women in leadership roles can actually really drive that change. where fashion or clothing is, a choice and not a factor that determines someone's success or someone's growth. Yes, clothes and the way you carry yourself, of course, they do have an effect on the impression you may have on others. But the way you dress should be a personal choice and not driven by these factors. And like wearing high heels or a business suit should really not be a contributing factor to success or growth. And even in fact, like at Mom's Joy, we do not follow a particular dress code and do not perceive or judge someone based on that. And even a lot of corporates, for example, like Google, are now dropping the whole dressing in a particular manner or carrying yourself in a particular manner. You are free to express yourself the way you want to, and it should be driven by the end of the day growth. Whether it's a woman leader, specifically a woman leader's growth should definitely be driven by their skills, talent, and hard work. And the perception that needs to be changed, it's all on us and our generation as well to actually be able to make that change in our environment. So that is what I
Oh,
think.
that's brilliant. So do you think fashion industry, though women are the more creative population, but still when it comes to fashionistas, you see it's quite dominated by men. And what do you think would be the role and how far women can get in fashion industry? What is your
Right.
take? It also includes odd hours like us, right?
Definitely. So actually, it is surprising that despite the fact that fashion is predominantly female, with a workforce which is like made up of approximately 70% women, women in the fashion industry hold actually less than 25% leadership positions in top fashion companies. And what we're looking for here is equal opportunities and the need to really bridge that gap. We have to constantly work at it by personally also breaking the glass ceiling and empowering women. And just to give an example, like at Mom's Joy, we have our own manufacturing unit, and we have women who are definitely interested in learning pattern making. Now pattern making predominantly is a sector which is dominated by men, but we were very proud and very happy to see that once we definitely, like I said, believe in giving equal opportunities. So we land up really training the two women who were so interested in pattern making, and right now they're expert pattern makers. So it's really on us to nurture an environment to employees to learn and grow their skills, and definitely on us to give them the equal opportunities. So I really believe that by increasing the wealth and opportunities of women, we can significantly impact our communities for the better.
So I think that goes a long way in making women the leader, the workforce, right? And I think that is where we should take it forward so that women can dare to climb up the ladder. So do you want to ask us doctors anything, Kriti?
So, being entrepreneurs, a lot of times we're constantly doing everything, just by ourselves. So sometimes I say, like, if I'm the CEO, I'm the chief everything officer. So we'll end up not having much time to take care of our health. So how can we really take care of our health and take out that time vis-a-vis our career growth?
I think Dr. Pranati would love to answer this. Ma'am, go ahead. Please answer this question, ma'am.
Right at the beginning, I think, health has to be prioritized. It's not about how can I take time to look after my health. You're not asking yourself that question when you're going on to your next project, isn't it? I mean, I say this to all women. You kind of work through the night to meet deadlines, and so unless you and it, again, the last year has proven that to us tremendously, like health is really wealth. So unless we view that it's a very important part of our own personal progress, maintaining good health, until that comes the fore, I think, this question is basically about prioritizing it, and also understanding that good health is not something that's dropped into our laps. It is something that we have to work towards. Just like we work towards the success of our projects, the success of, seeing more patients, learning new surgeries. Good health is also something that we need to work towards, which means that we have to invest of our time, of our resources into developing and maintaining good health. And once you do that, obviously, you will find how do people find time to look after their kids? How do people find time to look after home when they are working, and how do people then make these strides in their profession? Because they are giving of themselves, they are committing their time, they are committing their resources, and you will trade off something over there. But I think it should come from this personal belief that that trade off is worth it. You must understand that health is a very, very important thing that one needs to, acquire and maintain.
And I also would like to add that women do have a biological clock, right? We cannot ignore the biological clock, and unnecessarily intervention. I always say jokingly, look at the number of fertility clinics that have boomed in this country, and we are a 140 crore population. Why should it be needed, right? I think the teaching starts from day one, when they are training, which was never done to people like us. We learned it much later. So if we inculcate these habits, I think we do much better as a population. And our biological clock is definitely different from what men have, right? So we have to understand our health. So Pallavi, again an entrepreneur. So how do you think you are able to maintain a work-life balance being an entrepreneur? Like Kriti said, being a CEO means you are all in all, right? So how do you maintain that work-life balance?
So, you know what, Dr. Jaya, it's like, having a startup is like literally having two babies. Both are demanding, both are unpredictable, and both need your complete attention. So, before I became an entrepreneur, however, I was working as a marketing manager in Sanofi, and I got all the maternity benefits and everything. But I realized that the responsibilities don't end with the maternity leave. My kid is going to need me for 10 years at least, I'm sure. So I think the lack of flexibility that it provided, and the culture was designed for men, because it was expected that I wait after office hours. It was expected that I network after office hours. It was expected I party after hours, because that's how you grow. And that was seen as a sign of work rather than inefficiency. So that's when I thought, let's become an entrepreneur. Maybe at least I'll have the flexibility. But as an entrepreneur, I think the challenges are very different, because as Kriti said, you are all the time 24/7 working. But I think what I do is every morning I wake up and I make a choice. How much of an entrepreneur am I going to be today? And how much of a mother am I going to be today? And some days I'm an entrepreneur, and honestly, the mothering takes a backseat. Some days I'm a mother and entrepreneur, that part takes a backseat. On few days I do manage to strike a balance, but it is tough. I think having support, of course, makes a huge difference. And after hearing Aruna ma'am's story, I think we definitely still have it a little easier. I won't say very easy, but it is easier because at least we have a very encouraging support system, at our end. So that helps us a lot. And Dr. Pranati, between mothering and entrepreneurship, health does take a backseat. But after this session, I'm sure, I'm going to make an effort to make sure that that does not happen.
So I think Pallavi answered my second question. How is an entrepreneur different from a corporate job? And I also, to a certain extent, follow what Pallavi said. Like many of the jobs, I think once Narayan Murthy commented that people just keep sitting in the office for no reason, even if there is no work. And when you're expected to do that, you're not finishing your work on time. And then that becomes the corporate culture, and that becomes the culture for promotion, right? This is not for
Exactly.
everybody. Now people are changing in their approaches. And Narayan Murthy said, you work, if you're paid for 8 hours, work for 8 hours, right? So you're not paid to be there for 10 hours or 12 hours. And this is a challenge which Pallavi very rightly pointed out, which I see in many patients when they come and complain. So this marketing, I think the toughest one is marketing. I think you have to market. It's again a 24/7. I think you answered that question pretty well, Pallavi. So do you have any question for the doctors?
So, Dr. Jayashree, I had one question. Why do you think there is more female gynecologists in North India than any other part of the country? Why would that be?
So I think Pallavi, this surprised me when I moved from East to North Delhi. So in North Delhi, north of India, that is Delhi, the capital, and I have seen hardly 2-3 gynecologists I find who are diverted to minimal access surgeries or fertility treatments. And I found it very shocking because in East and the West, we do have a mix of gynecologists, both male and female. I think that with the culture and thinking process of North is more conservative in their approach. than the South. I think Dr. Pranati would agree. We have a lot of female gynecologists in South India. Yeah, Bombay is the best of the gynecologists from men. So I think there is inequality to women to the male gynecologist, you know. So I think this bias is very prevalent in the north. I mean, Dr. Pranati, what would you say about the situation in South?
So if you take like the states of Telangana and Andhra, again, we don't have that many male gynecologists. In the South, Kerala would see the largest number of male gynecologists. And it's very hard actually to comment on why. See, if you look at Kerala, Kerala also has the highest level of literacy. I'm not sure. There's no scientific study which supports as literacy levels in.
Right.
It's a personal choice that women make, I think. And very often, women with gynecological problems, childbirth issues, and pregnancy seem to be more comfortable consulting another woman. And probably because this was the case, over years, we also found men are reluctant to choose obstetrics and gynecology as a specialty because they come with this preconceived notion that, if you chose specialty, we wouldn't be successful. So both the things, now both things work in tandem. So you would see that in cities like Mumbai, Calcutta, and Kerala, where there are very successful gynecologists, more men are willing to take up that profession. Whereas in places like Telangana and maybe Delhi and Chennai and other places where there are very few male gynecologists, again, there are no role models. Like I think even for men in this profession, you need role models who are successful, so more men will choose that. So both things. So there's less availability of male gynecologists because less men are choosing that because they believe that they're not going to be successful. And more women, I mean, as there are more female gynecologists, people also get used to seeing women gynecologists and continue to be comfortable with them. I think both factors play a role. So if more men chose and became successful, you will see more men entering the profession also.
So I think we have had a very fantastic conversation as to what are the roadblocks, and I hope this conversation will be fruitful in removing some of the blocks at least, because we need what do you call influencers. I always say, like, I never knew what Insta did, but when my daughter's so influencers, like people who are in positions, role models, I think if they say, like my daughter when she was young, if Superwoman says something in Canada, she would think that is more correct than what the person sitting at home says. I think we should build influencers from women who say the right things. Aruna ma'am, would you like to say a few words as we come to the end of the discussion? All of us can give a take-home message or a message for Women's Day as we wind up the session. We start with Aruna ma'am.
I think women are doing incredibly well. And the aspirations of women, the way they're breaking all boundaries, they have seemed to move into a fluid space where gravity is not functioning. They're looking towards the stars and there's nothing holding them back. It makes me so proud and so happy to see this happening. And you can see it at every level of society and in every space. From the deepest of rural communities, there is now a fire burning, I think, in the belly of all women to find their space and make their mark. And all the best and all power to them. Thank you. It's been
Anisha, if
lovely,
you could say words.
lovely sharing the space with all of you. Learned a lot. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Anisha, if you could say a few words.
Yes, so I think I will just reinforce that I think the situation has changed quite drastically, even on the corporate space. So probably from where you were maybe some years ago to where it is now. I think today it's really encouraging for me to see young women aspiring to leadership roles and really articulating that very clearly and challenging the status quo. And I guess my only words of wisdom would be, please continue to challenge the status quo. I mean, there is absolutely nothing we cannot do. And absolutely make sure that we don't let anything stand in the way of getting where we want to go. So more power to us.
Kriti, if you would like to say something.
I just want to say that I'm so inspired by all of you, especially Dr. Aruna Dayal as well, and all the doctors over here. And I mean, I had such a wonderful session today. That's what I want to say. And I've learned so much from all of you, from all the lovely tips that you've given us. And definitely more power to us, and we're in great leadership positions where we can definitely make a change and change perspectives, where we're able to give equal opportunities to women across the board.
Pallavi.
Yeah, thanks, ma'am. I think the fact that we are having this discussion, and I'm sure it was not happening 10 years back, no one was sitting and discussing what women are doing or how do we evolve. I think that itself is a very big sign, and I think that's great. And I think each generation here is doing their part for the next generation and making things a little easier for them. And I think we should also just continue doing that. And yes, it was super inspiring to be a part of this panel. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Pranati ma'am, the last word from you, and then we all wind off. Thank you all so much. Pranati ma'am, over to you.
So yeah, thank you. It was very nice interacting with such a varied set of people and the kind of work they're doing. So going forward, what I think personally is that you know having children, these are the major roadblocks that women tend to face, for personal reasons. Like they take off because they have to have children, they have to look after children, they want to work. So this is never going the biology is never going to change. At least I can't see that happening in the next many hundreds of years. So that's non-negotiable. It's going to exist. And I think instead of viewing that as a roadblock, we have to bring in systems which celebrate all these events that a woman goes through in her, or values it in some way. Because I always find that I find women, when you ask them what their profession is, well, I'm just a housewife. And that word just is, I'm not sure from where it's coming, that lack of self esteem. So I think society in some way needs to place some form of value in terms of bringing both children into the world, in terms of looking after families, and how society is going to evolve to do that. I personally think housewives should be paid a salary, isn't it? They're doing phenomenal work. So how society is going to bring these changes in is very, very important, because pregnancy should not, a woman herself should not start viewing it as a chore or as a roadblock. This is something I have to get on with and set it out of the way to progress further. Becoming a mother itself should be viewed as progress, and in some way some value should be assigned to it. And unless society does that, this is going to be viewed as a roadblock. And does this society in future ever want to live without children? That's a choice a woman may start making, because this is viewed as a roadblock. So I think this has to be an overall shift in the perception of society and how it values all these events which are making a woman take a step back in her professional life, and they have to be valued, celebrated, and the woman should be given some recognition for them. Only then, that overall balance we can strike.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you. So we come to the end of our session.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Dr.
Thank
Jayashree.
you.
So, ma'am, I think I agree fully with you. I have come from a family where I was the only one studying in Tamil school, and my brothers were studying in a convent school. So you long way from there, right? So I used to do extraordinarily better than them, to say, oh, you're going in convent school, but I'm going to score 100 marks more than you, right? But obviously my dad's perception changed, and he welcomed my decision to be a doctor, and I would choose nothing less. And I think changing. So when I watch my daughter, I think, oh, how much liberation these people have had compared to what we had. And I think that goes a long way in what we are doing. And Aruna ma'am is doing a fantastic job bringing it to the rural people. So when we were young, it was a urban problem too. But now I think she's doing it for the rural girls. So I think we are going to have a fantastic road. Thank you all for participating. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely meeting everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.